case, we would have one lighter time in the evening instead of two dark times, morning and evening. If the morning is dark, so be it, she says.
Tara Bariana says, why can't we have a compromise and just change the time by 30 minutes? Not sure if that's really practical, but...
This one's going to strike some... Well, I'll leave you to say. Stephen Rowe in Cobham in Surrey. As Scots represent only 10% of the UK's population, why should 90% of us suffer by having to adjust to their needs? Good morning, Stephen.
And,
that's his view, not mine, or yours, or anybody else.
No, absolutely not. But Mike Ball in Devon, he said, if the Scots really wanted to stay the same, there's no reason why they can't continue changing as they do at present. Another one of the possible compromises. And
this, finally, from Baldia Chaga in England, says, it's very simple. Change the school times instead. It's a nightmare to change all clocks at home and work.
Yeah. Actually, many people saying that in some countries, for instance, they don't change the times, they just adjust the school timings in hot countries to avoid the midday heat and things like that. So
let us know if you agree or disagree with that. Email, text, phone, and don't forget you can go through our website, bbc.co.uk/breakfast. It's on the screen to get me out of a very difficult situation. There you are.
Now, Breakfast Declan Curry's had an electrifying week. He's been travelling around the UK to find out just how we're facing up to an impending energy crisis. The background to this is that almost all our nuclear power stations are earmarked for closure within 20 years, but no one's quite sure what will replace them.
From an offshore wind farm to an energy-efficient school, Declan has spent the week trying to find some of the answers.
Good morning to you from Electric Avenue at Westcliff-on-Sea, very near to Southend in Essex. And what better place to talk about electricity supply than Electric Avenue? Whether it's the alarm clock that woke you up, or boiling the kettle to make that cup of tea, or making some toast in the toaster, or even watching us on the television. They all need electricity, and we always assume it's going to be there at the flick of a switch. Today we're finding out if we need to go back to the past to find the energy that we need for the future, if we need to harness the power of nature to switch on the power in our homes. There's nothing new about using wind to do the things we want. Just a couple of miles away from this wind pump, you'll see that this wind pump has some modern cousins, the West Somerton wind farm, which went up just a little while ago. And I can't believe they've left me in charge of the nuclear power station. Fear not, it is just the training area rather than the actual business end of Sizewell B, otherwise we'd all be in trouble. We're taking a look at the electricity we get from nuclear today. Supporters of nuclear say this is really the only way you can get a sure supply that's cheap enough and is good for the environment, because nuclear, of course, has very little carbon dioxide emissions. That's the gas that causes global warming. Critics, though, say the risk of something like Chernobyl or a leak of radiation or just what we do with nuclear waste in the long term, that all those risks are just too great, too powerful for us to even think about opening up another generation of nuclear power stations. What you see behind me is where the gas comes into the power station, the gas that they use to make this electricity. And the gas is then burned in the furnaces, which are directly behind. You see up there the chimneys from the furnaces. And that's the gas that they burn to get the heat, to warm up the water, to create the steam, to drive the turbine that creates the electricity. So it's very similar to the nuclear power plant we were in yesterday. We're at Deansborough Primary School in Bowness near Falkirk this morning, because they make their own electricity here through this wind turbine, and they've also got their own eco group, and here they all are. Big cheer for the scooter. Yeah! There they are. That's the class of that. That'll go down like that. We will talk about energy. They not just generate their own electricity here at the school, they also have all the mod cons for saving energy. They've got special light panels that let the sunlight in to warm up the room but trap the heat. They've also got newspaper insulation on the walls, and as we saw just 20 minutes ago, moss and grass on the roof as insulation as well. I want you to say goodbye to everyone when I count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Bye!
And that was Declan reporting for Breakfast all this week on the future of the electricity industry. Britain's nuclear power stations approaching the end of their working lives.
Now, Last week, the teenage band, the Arctic Monkeys, topped the charts with their first ever single, with almost no promotion at all. Instead of the usual press interviews and endorsements, word of this new band got round via the internet.
Well, this weekend it looks like they'll be ousted by mighty boy band Westlife. With their retinue of PR and marketing men, the Irish heartthrobs sell records in a more traditional way. But is this becoming old-fashioned?
Well, in a moment we're going to be speaking to Mark Sutherland, who's the music editor for Six Music, and HMV's Gennaro Castaldo. But first, here's a look at the band whose success marked the birth of a download revolution, or even revolution.
With us now to discuss all of this, Mark Sutherland from Six Music and also Gennaro Castaldo, who's from HMV and deals with PR for them. Mark, first of all, how did the Arctic Monkeys do it? Well, what exactly were they doing instead of the traditional publicising of music?
Well, I think the unusual thing they've done is give their music effectively away for nothing over the internet to build awareness. Now, conventional music wisdom would say that that's the last thing you should do because people would then not go out and buy it when you release it as a single.
It's worked for them.
It has worked for them, yeah. I mean, their songs were all over the internet, certainly early on in their career. Fans were swapping songs that are unreleased, and it's paid off for them because if you go to an Arctic Monkeys gig, as I did a couple of weeks ago at the Astoria, you'll find that the fans are singing along every word of songs that haven't even been released yet.
Gennaro, bands that we're used to are surrounded with flunkies and PR men. Are their days over?
No, eventually, you've got to decide if you want to sell music, you have to sort of embrace the music industry in the way that it works. So I think all they've really done is they've come into it via a different route, in a very unconventional route, very effective, because it's got a real buzz around them, everyone's talking about them. But if they do want to sell their music, singles and the albums which they've got coming out in the early part of next year, then they're going to rely on marketing, PR and all the kind of paraphernalia.
But you would say that, wouldn't you? Because you need them to.
Yeah, but I mean, it's up to them. If they don't want to sell their music and make any money out of it, then I guess they won't go down that route. But if they do, which I'm sure they will, then they'll want to actually sell their music through record stores.
But Mark, they have made money out of it already, and they got to #1. Obviously, this strategy paid off for them.
It did, yes. I mean, ultimately, I think the Arctic Monkeys have only used the internet to build awareness of them as a band, get themselves a record deal, and then perhaps pursue a more conventional music
so you
business
do think
career.
that basically they have, as Gennaro said, that they have to go back to the more traditional?
I think they are going to, certainly, because they're releasing records via a record company. I think what will be interesting is what other bands who see the success they've had with this strategy do with it, and perhaps in the future that the next Arctic Monkeys are perhaps not going to bother signing to a record company. Perhaps they'll think, well, we can do it all ourselves via the internet, and that's when there'll be some interesting ramifications for the music industry.
I mean, Gennaro, proof perhaps that things haven't changed that much is we know who's going to be topping the charts next week, and it's through a rather traditional method, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like Westlife are actually going to get there. I think it's their 13th UK #1. They're also going for the Christmas #1 single as well. So I think clearly there's still a very substantial role to be played by normal standard sort of PR and marketing activities.
I'm interested to know whether you both think there was an element of the fans thinking that they had really also discovered something new, because it hadn't been promoted in the traditional way, that it had a different kind of edge to it. Do you think that's
that
true?
Was part of the appeal that they were on the inside. It was their band, no one else knew about them, and they could sort of swap the music, go onto chat lines. So that's really, I think, the engine behind their sort of awareness and growth.
Mark, some of us might be described as cynical. I might think behind this no more PR involvement is a huge PR campaign somewhere.
Well, I think there's certainly an awful lot of interest from the media now, but genuinely I think a lot of this has come after they got to #1, which is really, really unusual. Generally speaking, I mean, a guitar band getting to #1 is pretty unusual in Britain anyway, but generally speaking, we come off the back of a huge amount of coverage in the music press and on various radio stations and things like that. And that genuinely really hasn't happened with the Arctic Monkeys. I mean, Six Music played their first limited edition release, but not many other people did. And they haven't had Enemy front covers, Q front covers, a lot of the things that you'd expect a band like this to have.
Okay, Mark Sutherland, Gennaro Castaldo, many thanks to you both for talking to us.
Well, stay tuned. After 9 o'clock on Weekend 24, Carrie and I will be looking at Halloween trick-or-treats and asking if it's all just innocent fun or a growing menace on the streets.